All right, so this is the Teaching One-to-One Responsibility workshop. I mentioned that just because if for any reason you're sitting here and you're like, you know what, this really isn't what I thought it was going to be. I go to a lot of unconferences, and one of the rules in an unconference is if this isn't for you, get up, use the power of your feet, and go somewhere where you want to be, where something's going to make sense to you. So, Damien and I will, neither of us will be offended if, again, it's not for you. Get up, go somewhere else, enjoy it. You spent good money to be here. You might as well get something out of what you're listening to. Also, it helps our ratings. So, you know, with that, okay. Again, who are we? I always like to, when we start anything like this, give you some background on who it is you're actually listening to, who are you hearing from, and why. So my name is Bill Stites. I'm the Director of Technology at the Montclair Kimberley Academy. I've been there for 20 years.
And my name is Damien Barrett. I'm a system technician. I'm the Mac IT guy. I'm the nerd, the IT nerd at the school, basically in charge of deploying a lot of this stuff.
What are we as MKA? Again, we are, I believe at this point, the second largest independent day school in the state of New Jersey. You can see our numbers here, number of deployed devices. Our one-to-one program spans pre-K through 12. We're divided into 3 campuses. I started my career as a 3rd grade teacher. My background is early childhood ed. I've got a degree, and all the 3 of the people that work for me are here, are going to laugh, from the Department of Home Economics at Montclair State University. So that's what the early childhood ed degree was. So give you a little background on where I'm coming from is, you know, a teacher's perspective, where my training lies. Again, 24/7, 365 is our program for 3 years. We really don't see the devices unless they are damaged or for some reason in grades 4 through 12. Our primary school has one-to-one experiences. So we have carts, kids will roll a cart and they'll use the same laptop or same iPad during that period. They do not take them home. They do not have in-class ownership. And really,
just to be clear on that, that means that we do not pull the equipment back in the summertime.
right.
The equipment goes home with the child over the summer.
Exactly. And all employees, because all of our faculty have laptops, our administrators, a number of our admins, assistants, and all of our students in grades 4 through 12 are all device administrators. Everyone is an admin on the machine. And also, we were recently awarded the Apple Distinguished School designation this year because of our program. If you're familiar with the Apple Distinguished programs, you can either be an Apple Distinguished Educator or an Apple Distinguished School. We were fortunate to be awarded that this year. Why would you consider making students, 4th graders, admins on their own machines? Why would you go down this route of basically opening up what many people in tech would describe as like the Pandora's box of problems that everyone envisions when they see this or when they hear about us doing this or other schools doing this, and providing this basically out-of-the-box experience for everyone in the school? And all of this comes back to learning goals. When you're going to run a one-to-one deployment, it's not about the technology. It's about what you want to do in terms of providing every student with 24/7 access to technology. It has nothing to do whether you are putting an iPad in their hands, whether you're putting a MacBook Air in their hands, whether you're putting a Chromebook in their hands, whether you're putting an Android device in their hands. It doesn't matter. It matters what you hope to achieve with that device and that level of access when you have bodies in the chairs, when you have teachers that you're running professional development for. You want to think about what all of those learning goals are. Now, your curriculum people, your people in the ed tech side of the house, your teachers, are all going to come together and help define what those goals are going to be. And that's going to take time. That's going to take, hopefully, will take a lot of time. This is not something you rush. Our program, basically, before we put computers in the hands of teachers, took us 5 years to implement. From our strategic planning process to rolling it out. And if you really want to count the time it took, it was probably about 10 years, because by the time we got to strategic planning, we had already been doing a lot of other work leading up to that. So what you want to do also in terms of not only what are those learning goals that you want to have in the classroom, what do you want to teach outside of the classroom? And I'm not talking about homework. I'm giving you a device. What do I hope to have, or what would I expect to have you be able to do on your own device? How do we empower you to learn not only with the device, but from the device, and how you need to manage that device so that you can be, we hear this term all the time in education, independent, autonomous learners. Well, if we want people to be truly independent, we've got to give them the freedom and empower them to be independent on their own to go through all of this. So how do you go about doing all of this? If you want to go this route, how do you set up the planning? How do you deal with this? And again, it all comes back to planning. You gather together your constituent groups, and that includes students. That includes teachers. That includes administration. You get them all together and you plan and you plan and you plan. One of the best things that we did at our program, which was going to lead into this, empowering the end user, empowering the student with these devices, is that we started a student leadership program. We gave our faculty the devices so that we could begin and properly plan our professional development around that. But we enlisted the help of students, about 36 at the time, in grades 5 through 12. We started a laptop leadership program. And with that program, we asked students to basically apply to join the program, and with that, they would receive the technology that we were going to be demoing, the applications that we were going to be trying. We were going to meet with them on a monthly basis, both on our 2 campuses at our middle school and our upper school, as well as monthly meetings after school with the entire group to bring them all together. We planned, we involved our parent organization as well, because through all of this, through every piece of this, the communication is absolutely essential. Communication is something that when you start out, you need to make sure people understand what it is you're actually going to be doing, what you hope to achieve through those learning goals, and also to be basically your myth busters. People are going to hear that you're giving them a device, that they're not bringing their own device in this case. You're giving them the device, and it's going to be from the school, and their first thought, particularly among students, is going to be that Big Brother's watching. I'm not going to be able to install the applications that I want. I'm not going to be able to put my movies on there. I'm not going to be able to put my music on there. This is going to be my computer, but it's not going to be mine. I'm going to be beholden to whatever things the school puts in place. And you need to be very clear about that and what you're going to try to do and what you intend to do with this. And those student voices, those leaders that you have, are going to be your first best line of defense in terms of counteracting some of those things. You want to make sure that you put stuff online for people to find. Build it out. If you're going to document it, if you're going to talk about it, if you're going to record it, put it in a place where people can access it. So build out a section of your website or a portal or some area where you can put it, a wiki, and go through everything. Talk about it all. The FAQ section that we have here is voluminous. It's long. We answer just about every question. In FAQs, there's actually even some videos that we include in there. We do a lot with third-party tech tools. One of the things that we had to address is COPA for our younger students. If you're not familiar with COPA, that's that 13-year-old line in the sand that you see from Facebook and a lot of these other applications that you get out there. Those are all things that are going to be the stuff that you're going to need to do. And when you're communicating, don't just put it online. Again, with the leadership piece, with the students, we were meeting with them regularly. These were our go-to people. And the teachers and the faculty and the staff knew who these kids were, and they were the go-to people for them. So when they had a problem, they weren't necessarily coming to Damien, myself, Steve, who works with me. Mike was not there when we started, but aren't going to Mike at the time, all at the time, the first people we go to. They will look in the class and see if any of those leaders are in there. They'll turn to them because those were the students, those were the people, those were the faculty people that were, and the students that were helping us all along as we were setting all of this stuff up. You're also going to want to think about using those students when you run in-person events. Get people in the school. Have people come in before you launch, during the day. Make yourself available in the evening. Record what you're talking about and put these things online. Because again, the myth busting, the understanding the program is going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of issue as you go down this road.
In a number of cases, the students themselves, the student leaders themselves would be presenting a piece of information in front of the entire student body at an assembly. So the message wasn't coming directly from us, the big brother or the staff or the administration. It was coming from the students themselves. We felt that was a very approachable way of delivering a message that needed to be made to the student body.
It takes you out of that. A lot of times, it doesn't seem top down when you have your peers, in the case of the students, talking about this. Being able to share their stories, being able to explain things on and on. And again, you're enabling this level of leadership both in the classroom, again, in front of the entire student body, in front of the entire school body. These students also then become the people that you tap when you run your professional development. We just, at the end of June, we had a week-long, or I should say about it's a 3-day long, it used to be 4 days, 3-day long Teaching and Learning Institute, where half of the people that were instructors there, were the students that were in this leadership position. And the faculty appreciate the fact that they're there because it is not, all of this is not being taught out of necessarily context at that point, because they're hearing, if the students aren't actually instructing on something, they're sitting down in the sessions and they're the voice, they could provide the voice for the students while we're talking about these things in terms of what's going to work. And it's very often that everyone will stop, turn, and look to these students for help. And again, this all develops over time, this level of trust all develops over time, and as you structure your program.
One more thing that I do with our student leaders is I take a handful of them every summer and I actually train them to become Apple certified technicians. And so I walk them through the Apple training materials, and then they can actually, under my guise, officially repair Apple hardware.
Right. This is actually one of our leadership students. It's a picture from a cover of our review, outlining this. We had a whole kind of thing on what it meant and what we were doing with all of our learning vis-a-vis technology. So distant learning stuff, learning opportunities overseas, how we're leveraging technology to communicate, as well as the program over the whole. Again, as I mentioned, that leadership group we take from grades 5 through 12. We ask the students to apply, and after about 2 years, they need to reapply for that. So it's not just you get in 5th grade and you're in it all the way through 12th. You reapply, and what we try to strike is a good gender balance with that, so that we don't have too many guys or again too many girls. We try to strike a balance between those that are the techie kids and those that are the more social or the more athletic kids. So you get a balance, a cross section of your entire student population in the program. So again, that voice can be heard in all aspects of school, and it's very important to have that. The other thing with that, those committees that we talked about or that I mentioned, is that we actually started a implementation committee before we actually launched. So we had our student involvement, we had involvement from our academic division heads at all 3 campuses. We had involvement from our dean of students from each of the areas. We had our communications director on the team. We had technology representation both on the ed tech and the IT side. It's important also to note that in our school, we have a director of ed tech and a director of technology myself in the school as well to really focus the work that's going on. Our CFO was in all of these meetings. So we had this really strong representation from within the school about the program as well. So the leadership that we're talking about, this was not just the tech department or even the ed tech department leading this charge. This came from all aspects of the school, and every constituency within the school understood that. We then worked with also our parent association so that they knew what was going on, so they could be kind of the liaisons as well when asked questions about this, because again, they'd be stopped, in town, or, people would start talking about this at cocktail parties, or, when they got together for lunches or whatever it is people do that don't have to work during the day. But we wanted to make sure that everyone was well informed with all of this. But this is great. We're talking a lot about a very small subset, though, of our student body. We're talking about empowering, about 36 students. But this idea of empowerment, this idea of really being able to teach, to instruct people so that they knew what they were doing, so they could become self-sufficient. They could become those independent, autonomous learners that we all talk about in here. How are we going to do this? How are we going to begin this process of really launching? When we deployed 850 MacBook Pros in 2 days, and we had everyone working on them the next day. How do you do that and have that level of understanding of what it means to be an owner, what it means to be an admin on that device? And what we did is we leveraged those students. We sat down with those students and we said, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to set this up so that we can leverage things like advisory groups and talk to them during advisories? How can we leverage the times where we have everyone together and we can just simply let people know what's coming down the line? The advisory groups, though, would give them a little bit more opportunity for small group discussion, but then these large group discussions. But then what do you do to make sure that everyone has passed some sort of thing? I mean, we all have to, in order to get our driver's license, we all have to take a driver's test. We read a manual, we have to take a test, and then we get our driver's license. Well, that's pretty much exactly what we did. We created a driver's manual. And if you go to driversmanual.mka.org, you can see this manual. And in this manual, we put everything we could think of. We sat there and I said, it was about 1.5 years, almost 2 years before we launched that we brought these students on. We started developing all of these resources. Now, the one thing I do want to say, and I meant to say this at the beginning, is we're talking about our program. Our program is a school-provided device. You can take pieces of all of this and apply it to a BYOD. You can apply it to different types of programs as you roll them out. Maybe it's a level of access to your, the network that you give them if they can pass the test, so on and so forth. We'll talk about a number of different things, but if you look at this and you say, well, I'm not running it this way, look for the little pieces that you can pull out of this and take and make your own. Believe me.
That's what we did.
Exactly.
We spent years and years and years looking at one-to-one programs and then pulled the pieces we liked best and developed our own. So we're encouraging you to do the same.
Yeah, steal away. Take whatever you want from this, please. So again, we developed this driver's manual. We put it together. The students, they worked on helping us craft the content that we were putting up there. And this wasn't just the text copy that was going up there. These were other resources that we were going to be putting up there as well. The one thing that they helped us develop is our acceptable use policy. And the word acceptable use policy, when you're looking at one-to-one programs, you're going to see a lot of that language kind of changing right now. We're still calling it an acceptable use policy, but you'll hear people refer to it as a responsible use policy. They'll change, they're trying to change the nomenclature around what it is they're talking about here. But one of the things that we want it to do is we want to be able to provide an admin experience for everyone. and this is what Damien's going to talk about a little bit later on, but maintain a level of administrative control on the base so that we can do the things that we need to do as IT professionals to keep ourselves sane, to help people help themselves. We're going to give you a level of control that is pretty wide open, but we want to make sure that we've got a certain level of control on our ends where if we need to step in, we can do so, but do so easily, remotely, and with as little kind of touch as needed. And again, in doing this, our students actually helped us look at what we were going to consider minor offenses and major offenses. And well, you can go online and look at our AUP and see what those things actually are. But again, a minor offense would be something that, you know, would be reported to the Dean of Students. They would deal with it as a discipline issue, even with the major ones. But the major ones that we are talking about here are the things that are truly illegal, that we don't want people to do. The other is things that were going to impact what it was that we, 1, 2, 3, 4, need to deal with on a day-to-day basis because they're doing certain things that are breaking some of those underlying controls that Damien's going to talk a little bit more about. Now, I mentioned all the different types of resources that the kids were putting together. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to read all that much. I read a lot, but I don't like it. I look at my son. I have an 11 and a 9-year-old, and my 11-year-old spends all day on YouTube. So how better to connect with students than to make videos? Because then I could watch what it is and I don't need to read. I can sit there and drink my coffee and do whatnot. So this is an example of one of the videos that the students put together in case of a water spill. Part of the process of making all of these things, as we made all these different videos, was being able to give kids technology and allow them just to break it and spill stuff on it and smash it and do different things. They absolutely loved that. It was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun seeing them do this. But again, we gave them the prompt. We talked about what the steps were going to be, and then we let them go. And we what they came back with. And we did some minor editing, or we said, all right, this is appropriate, this works great, and this isn't appropriate, and let's try this again. But they put all of these things together. They did all of these things, and then what we did is we then unleashed this basically on the student body. And we use, for our LMS, we use Moodle. And what we did is we developed a driver's test in Moodle. And what we did with this is we wanted to make this test something that everyone that took the test needed to pass it with 100%. But it was an open book test. We weren't monitoring them. When we first laid it out, we even put in things to help. Oh, go look here. Here's the link to find the actual answer to this question. We would let them take it, if after they took it and they saw what they got wrong, they would be able to come back and take it over again. And what would then happen is when we gave the machines out, they were all out in kind of like a standard user, that had limited access. After they passed the driver's manual, actually, I'm sorry, when we first gave them out, they were all admins. We gave them a month to pass the test. Those that didn't pass were demoted down. Okay, so we gave everyone admin access out of the box 4 years ago, and then when they did it. And what we did, we just went through releasing on a 3-year cycle. What we did this past summer was we refreshed. We went from MacBook Pros to MacBook Airs. And what we did at that point is when we went through the migration process, because we use Time Machine backup drives, we give everyone, just so you know what we give everyone, we give everyone a laptop We give them a time machine backup drive, because why bother with network storage when you can give everyone and teach them what it means to back up and manage your own backups, rather than creating a network-based solution that costs you a ton of money in network overhead, a ton of money in network storage. Why bother with that? Steve Clayton, who's my network manager, we were sitting down with network engineers, with storage engineers, trying to figure this, and just watching the price tag go up, and I'm like, wait a minute, how much is a 500 gig drive? Let's teach these kids what it means to back up. Let's teach our faculty what it means to back up.
You wanted to mirror the real world.
Right, exactly. And we want to, you don't have, well, you all have IT departments, but I mean, you don't necessarily have an IT department in your house. You know, when you go away to college, there's IT help, but they're not yours. You're going to have to, make appointments to go see them, do whatever. So you've got to learn these best practices in terms of what it means for backup, for proper data recovery, for proper battery life, all of these things. And all of this stuff, all of these questions that we asked were questions related to those best practices. So again, they would go through, they'd take this test, and we would, again, then empower them to be admins on their own through all of this. And again, once they did that, we did have basically this out-of-the-box experience. Now, what we did during our deployment is this was really one of the only times that we had all the kids during a set period of time where we were able to give them actual instruction. But what we did is we really just helped walk them through the process of unboxing the device, setting some basic user information, making sure their password was set correctly, make sure that they could get into our version of Moodle, make sure they could log into the help desk, show them, we with this program, how many of you use Evernote? Okay, we were the first school in the nation actually to launch Evernote school-wide. Every one of our students got a Evernote Pro account with this when we did it. So we got them into Evernote. We did all of this work with them. And we had them, and again, these are, at the time, I believe, some of our fourth graders going through this.
This was an exciting day.
It was. It was. The best part was Damien, I video of Damien doing a countdown for everyone to hit the button just so you could hear like these 40 startup chimes go at the same time. Oh, we were close. We were close. Exactly. It was pretty good. But what we have here is another video I want to share with you. And this is, we have a video that we developed for the school called Voices, where we have different people talking about different aspects of what it's like to be at school. It's a marketing piece. But here you have one of our current laptop leadership students reading a piece written by a former one. I just wanted to share this with you as well.
The thing that has meant most to me about being a member of the Student Laptop Leadership Group is that, whatever our age, we are all leaders. To sit at a meeting and have a fifth grader teach a high school senior a few tips about his Mac is simply incredible. Being able to help a student solve a problem on his laptop is even better. Ryan Durando, class of 2013.
And this experience is one where, again, this is not just from a leadership perspective. I meant one of the biggest fundamental switches that we've seen in the school by empowering students in the way in which we have is that the techie student is kind of disappearing. Yeah, when you provide a level of access where you're not locking everything down, you're allowing people to make mistakes. And people, they make mistakes. They spill stuff. Their hard drive goes bad. They drop their machines. They install stuff that they shouldn't be installing based on our AUP. They do all of these things and they learn from them. And they share that knowledge with their students. The teachers share that knowledge with their colleagues. And the level of discourse and the dialogue that you engender by providing this level of access changes everything really about how each person views one another in terms of what they're good at and what they can do when it comes to using these things. And it can be at the machine level, it can be up here, it could be just that somebody understands how to do something in iMovie or understands how to do something with Excel. Everyone becomes this level of expert. And this comes more from, again, this idea of just having this level of access, but being able to provide all of this, but being able to provide it in a way where you are not inhibiting what people are doing. Now, I mentioned that there is this kind of base level of control that we still need to maintain with all of this. And one of the things that Damien's going to get into are, again, what are these tools of the trade that we use to help people help themselves? Now, again, this is before I hand this off to Damien. Damien's going to be talking about the way in which we use this to empower things. And when we stop for the Q&A, and if you have questions throughout, if I didn't mention this, please stop us at any point. But Damien's going to talk about this as it relates to how we're using this to allow people to help themselves. But we're more than willing to talk, again, at a greater level about, the technical aspects of this, as well as some of the other the kind of logistical, internal things that you need to do as a school to address these things. So with that.
All right. Thanks, Bill. I get to talk. All right, the tools of the trade, right? So what are we doing? How are we implementing this thing and still having some kind of fail-safe, right? When I first started talking to my colleagues 5 or 6 years ago about rolling out a one-to-one program where everybody was an administrator, the looks of disbelief that I got were amazing. People were like, you're doing what? What on earth are you talking about? This is going to fail miserably. That's what everybody told me. Happy to report that they're wrong. It's been a grand success for us. And it's because we took so much time planning. Bill talked about that. Planning. And part of that planning was deciding which tools to use to help keep tabs on these things that are going out into the wild. The first one that I discovered was this tiny little program out there, a Japanese developer. I can't remember his name even, but he's from Japan. And it's called A-Launch. It's a very simple little tool, but it's been really effective for us in providing a one-stop shop for some of the commonly accessed resources across all of our students and faculty. It's just a menu bar item tool, and it lets you organize things and group things and put lines in and add custom icons. And you'll see here that we have links to all of our commonly accessed things like Moodle and self-service, which is part of Casper, which we'll talk about next, LibGuides and Turnitin and Evernote and so forth. There are 5 or 6 other programs that do very similar things. I liked this one. It still continues to be actively developed, and it's free. A-Launch. We also use Untangle Firewall. This is free software. However, we do pay for a support contract with them. It is free software you can download and install on a Linux box that does a lot of things for us. It does load balancing. It does filtering using WebSense. It does tracking or logging of which IP number went to which site at which time. So we have these logs. We do not actively scan them. However, in a couple rare cases, we've had to go into the logs and pull up something and say, was this student at this site at this time?
One of the important distinctions here is that the work that Steve's done on our network, basically through some of the way in which we assign IPs, we can actually view these logs by name, not by IP or by MAC address. The way in which Steve's done this, and if people have questions at the end, if he's willing to, he'll share it with you. But just in terms of moving that through, so for non-IT people, for your deans of students that may need this information, you can provide logs in basically user-reader format.
And that's done, and that part of it is done on the Windows Server 2012 side. Reserved DHCP, every laptop is given a certain IP number. It always gets that IP number from the DHCP server, and then it's mapped in the Untangle to a username or a computer name. No, and we don't track at home. When they leave our campus, we don't do any tracking at all. Well, no, we don't do any web traffic tracking.
Filtering? Do you filter them when they're off?
When they're off, nope. We do not filter when they're off the reservation.
Not at all. And to give you an idea, we do very little filtering in the building. We filter for porn, obscene material.
There's no problems with SIPA?
We're an independent school, so there's certain things, but we don't take any federal funding. So in terms of any federal mandates that are out there, we do not have to adhere to those.
We are looking at some of the stuff, and one of the problems isn't actually a COBA or SIPA, stuff like that. It's the parents, right?
Right? Yep.
They drive your policy. So how do you communicate?
The parents, we communicate through all of that communication that we do up front, through our admissions sessions that we run. We're very clear on the type of school that we are. And as an independent school, if we're not your cup of tea, there are a ton of other options out there that are. The one-to-one program, as we implemented it, when we were putting it in, it became a huge selling point for the school, and for some parents it became a huge detractor. It did that for faculty as well. There were faculty that the idea of giving, every student a laptop, one that was going to be particularly open, that they weren't going to be able, we didn't install any software on this so that the teacher can see what is going on everyone's laptop. We didn't do that. For those of you that may have remembered the Lower Marion case with that scared the living hell out of us. And we made sure that our privacy policies were in place, that we weren't going to be putting anything in that was going to be able to open up that door as well. So,
We're a small school district in southeast Pennsylvania, public school, and what we were told is that years before, we're just beginning to learn. Matter of fact, the unit should be there when I get back to school. We were told that once it leaves, because we've loaned them to students laptop, we were told that once it, even though they signed the acceptable use policy, once it leaves the campus, it is no longer our responsibility. As long as we have everything in place, we send it out.
I think that's probably true.
In
Yeah.
Lower Marion,
Well-
what his boss told us last week was, he said it wasn't the fact
Right.
that they were doing it, it was that they didn't disclose that
Right.
they did it,
Right.
or what they
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, without a doubt.
There's a long Wikipedia article if you want to research the case. It's an interesting case about webcams and spying and so forth. But one more question.
Is your JSS open just internally, or is it open to the
Our,
outside?
our JSS is public facing, so that the machines can be managed to a certain extent while they're at home. So that brings up great segue into the next tool, and that is Casper Suite. How many of you in here are currently using Casper? Okay, good. How many of you are currently using Absolute Manage? FileWave? Okay. Hodgepodge of tools that kind of do the same stuff? Okay, all right. That's about what I've seen in other conferences. Casper has made great inroads into the education market. It's a pretty decent tool. I'll go on a limb and say it's the best tool, but that's my opinion. I evaluated all
In
of
an
these
all-Mac
things.
environment.
In an all-Mac environment, it's the best. It's the best tool. The others are great. There's nothing wrong with FileWave. There's nothing wrong with Absolute Manage. But if for our environment and for our specific purposes, for what we wanted to do, this provided the best flexibility and the best tool set for me to get that done. So some of the things we do. Self-service is a piece of Casper, and it's a place for you to let your end users install software or run utilities that can then help them to help themselves. And you'll see I have a couple utilities up here I've written, things like flush your DNS caches, right, which you used to have to do via command line tool. It's documented pretty well online, but if you have a user on the phone and something's not resolving properly, one of the first things you do is flush that DNS cache. So we teach our users, if you're seeing this kind of a problem, go hit this button in self-service, and then that should probably fix the problem. If it doesn't, come see us.
This is a great example of one. I mean, this one right
Right.
here that Damien put together, this is running a number of things that you would have to come in and sit down with either Damien or Mike or Steve and have them sit there and run all of these things on your computer. Damien's done a fabulous job of being able to script all of these things and throw them up there and make all these one-button things. So again, we're not necessarily going to teach them this level of, troubleshooting and helping, but we're going to empower them and give them the tools to allow them to do this themselves. So they know that, oh, my computer's running a little slow. Let me go here and hit this button and watch what happens.
Example, we had a group of students, our fourth graders, and our fourth graders are unique in the sense that they do not get admin access until they've gone through a pretty significant training period. They're the only grade that does that. So for a while, we had fourth graders who were not administrators on their laptops. And that caused problems in the classroom. They were unable then to go home and add their home printer to their computer. Well, how do you fix that? I simply wrote a very simple tool that elevates the privileges for the MacAdmin user to allow them to add that printer. And that's the top left corner. I wrote a tool to restart the print system. I wrote a tool to optimize computer, which basically does cache clearing and a few other things and then reboots the machine. And you'll see there's all kinds of categories on the right there that aren't being displayed here, but places for teachers to go to install printers or install a piece of software that's related to their curriculum.
What's great about that list is one of the things, if you've got software that you say, we put the full Adobe suite on all of our computers, we put the full Office suite, but let's say you weren't investing that money in those products, but you had students that were taking certain courses and you wanted them to be able to have that software. You can actually scope and create groups in Casper so that what one student sees in their available software list is different than what another student sees. Or if you want it not to show, this is a screenshot from my machine, so I see like all of the printers, I see all of the campus software. You can segment it so that only the upper school students see the upper school tools that they need. So it's very powerful in that regard.
Have you seen any kids lending their credentials to other kids to get different sets?
No, because we pretty much, we front load these machines with so much software, because the other benefit of a school owned is that, we own the software. We buy the licensing based on what we need, so we get these things at great cost. We pretty much, there isn't much that I think you could think of as far as, valuable software that's going to cost you a ton of money that we're not already putting on these machines.
So it is not carte blanche. We'll get to questions in a little. It's not carte blanche. We do not hand the computer out and say, you can do whatever you want. We do not say that. We say, there are a few things you're not allowed to do. And that's actually the next slide. So there are some restrictions, and they're outlined in our AUP. We also use Casper for some basic monitoring. In this sense, what I'm talking about is application usage monitoring. And this only comes up when we have an advisor come to us and say, Johnny, he failed his quiz last week. And I asked him about it, and he couldn't really give me an answer for how he was using his computer. Could you go take a look and tell me, how many hours and for what applications he was using that computer over the past couple of days?
One thing with that is a lot of times the advisor will be talking to the parent. The parent will be, giving this type of feedback. We want to know more about this.
And so we can go in and take a look at Johnny's computer and see that, oh yeah, look at that, on July 3rd, he played World of Warcraft for 6 hours and 9 minutes. Like, well, okay, that's kind of a problem, right? That's a lot of hours, right? Now ignore this as July 3rd, just pretend it's April 3rd. If he's playing World of Warcraft for that many hours in a day, that probably is affecting his schoolwork. And so then that can bring up a nice conversation between the advisor and the student. Hey, did you know that you were playing World of Warcraft for 6 hours? Well, I played, but I didn't know it was that long. And then we can give them this screenshot, and then the student can go back and say, oh yeah, okay, well, I didn't realize it was that many hours. Maybe I'll make the better decision next time and not play for so many hours.
This level of monitoring, one of the things that we're very clear on is that, we let students know that, when you're at school, when you're on the school's network, we're logging everything, where you go, getting back to those internet logs. We're very clear about that. The faculty, we said we use Moodle. Moodle has very extensive logging. Faculty can go in and look at any of their students and see when they logged into their classroom site to get the homework for that night, or to take that test, or to do any of those things. We're very clear about that. We're very clear that, there's a level of monitoring that we do on the laptops, but we're also very clear, as Damien mentioned, that we're not actively monitoring. We don't have flags set for certain conditions to go off to let us know that, oh boy, we better pull this kid in here right now because X, Y, and Z were triggered. We only do these types of things in the event of, either parental or advisor concerns, or concerns that stem from what goes on in the school from an interaction standpoint.
Just like the web logs from the Untangle, this is another one of our fail-safes. This is let's actually go find out what was going on here, and then address it in a kind of a humane, non-threatening way with the student to try to change the behavior, because reprimanding them is really probably not going to work. So you get them to try to change the behavior through positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement. We do block a few things. I'll repeat what I said earlier. It is not carte blanche. Students are not allowed to do anything they want. They're allowed to do almost anything they want. And there are a few things that we do not allow, and I use Casper to help me detect the stuff and block it. This is a screenshot of a restricted process in Casper for one of the applications that we block. Anybody who knows the P2P world, this is one of the more common file sharing P2P apps that's out there. It's called Transmission. I have a list of about 60 or 70 applications that I block on our computers, and they're just simply not allowed to run. And when a student runs one of them, student goes and downloads it from wherever he gets it from, runs it, Casper detects that process running, kills the process, deletes the application, and then pops a message up to the end user saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a file sharing app, this is against our AUP, if you have any questions, please come talk to us. And then if this happens, sometimes I'll get emails at night where this happens like 7 times in a row. Because then the system will email me,
We just want to get through.
and I'm like, 7 times? That means you ignored the first 6 messages. And then that becomes a disciplinary issue where we bring the kid and we say, you know what, you ignored this message 6 times because I got 7 emails. And then it becomes an issue, why are you ignoring this message? Once or twice, fine, but 7 times? So that becomes a disciplinary issue that gets addressed. We also use Casper to send out messages to the end users. Sometimes these computers go out and I don't see the computer for 3 years. I literally don't put hands on it for 3 years. So one of the ways we can communicate with these students, because we know that they're not necessarily emailing each other anymore, right? Anybody at the front lines knows that the email is kind of dead with this generation. So they're not responding to my emails. So how then do I communicate with them? I can use Casper to send messages to the end user saying, hey, in this case, you need to turn your computer in because you're graduating on June 6th. I also do some light management of the systems. We ask that our students know how to keep the systems up to date. We teach them how to do it in the driver's manual, and then we ask them to keep them up to date. Occasionally, a handful of students will not do this. They'll ignore the update message over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, so let's send some gentle prodding out. Like, hey, please find some time to update to 10.8.5, right? Run an Apple software update. So it's an extra message on top of what the OS already provides. This is kind of hard to see. I apologize for the screenshot. Unfortunately, I had no way to take a screenshot of a login window, so I had to take a picture with a camera. This is me enforcing an update on a computer. And there's only 3 things that I really enforce updates for, where as the Casper admin, I want that software to be on that computer, period. And it's Flash, Java, and Apple security updates. So everything else is managed by the kid. They're the ones going to Apple software update. They're the ones going to install the new version of Firefox. They're the ones going to install the new version of Office. But because these are the 3 vectors for malware infection, I decided from a security standpoint, I want these machines to be more secure. And by doing that, the way you do that is you keep the software up to date. And so on these 3 cases, this is what I push out automatically at login for systems.
One thing, and Damien isn't solely deciding what's
Right.
going on. This is that implementation committee that I mentioned. That committee actually meets. It wasn't just to implement, it's been going on because we're always implementing something new. So that committee, which was an ad hoc committee that started before we launched, continues on. So we bring up things like this. This is what we're considering doing. We're going to do it for X, Y, and Z reasons so that, again, everybody understands what's going on. This stuff is not just simply happening in isolation.
So our system management is mostly hands-off, mostly, with a couple exceptions. All right, some of the lessons we've learned. Bill and I are going to bounce back and forth on this. I'll start this one. We deployed the first round we deployed with 10.6. And we made 2 decisions that we regret. The first was we purchased, because we did not know how the battery was going to work.
Well, no, that's the next slide.
That's the next slide, okay.
Okay.
We decided midway through our 3-year program that we were going to update everybody to 10.7. And I went through a lot of technical hurdles and ultimately decided that the best way to do that was probably from a flash hard drive. Casper caching was breaking. I couldn't get it working. We had a deadline. We had to do it. So we pulled all the equipment in and we manually updated them all to 10.7. I would not do that again. Okay? Mostly because 10.7 wasn't as good as 10.6. Let's say it that way.
The other thing,
There's a polite way to
the
say it.
reason that we did that, and the reason that we were kind of committed to doing that over the 3-year period, was one, we told everyone that we would keep them as up to date as possible on the most recent versions of software that was out there. The reason that we wanted to do it ourselves and that we needed to pull them in is because at the time our management framework would break if we allowed end users to install a completely new version of the OS onto their own machines. Now, as we're looking at Mavericks and Casper, that's no longer the case.
Right.
But at that time, we needed to pull all of these things in and go that route.
The
So it was
larger
one of the
point on
reasons-
this, the larger point on this is you want to vet your updates properly, and you want to get them into the hands of a fair number of people running it before you start to do it. It sounds like common sense, but it bit us. It wasn't crazy bad, but it was bad enough. It was like, yeah, maybe we go back and do that a little differently next time.
The other thing was batteries. When we were initially looking at the program, we were looking at Apple laptops that had the batteries that you could take the coin and just pop the battery out and put another one back in. And because we were going to own all of them, what we were all set to purchase were these battery banks where if somebody's battery was dying, they could simply pop theirs out, pull a fresh one out of the charger, pop it in, put the old one in, let that one charge, and go to class and keep working. Because I don't know about you, but some of our buildings are very old. And we weren't going to be able to outfit all of those buildings with new power in the floor and everywhere. We didn't even have the power coming into the building to support all of this. So we told students that their batteries needed to last throughout the entire day. And one of the things that I worried about, and we all worried about, when we realized that Apple was now putting all of their batteries in and there was no way to take the battery out easily, is that we're going to need to do a battery swap. So along the same time that we did the OS upgrade, we opened up every machine and took every battery out of every machine and swapped the battery out. Now we could do that because we were an Apple certified shop and we could actually do that repair in-house. But I would never do that again. The most disgusting thing in the world is the inside of a computer from a student.
Remember that this was our first go around on our laptop,
Now-
our first cycle, and we were nervous
Right.
about whether a battery would actually last 3 years.
what we now have, and some of the testing things that we've done is we test the new computers as they've come in. So the Airs that we deployed had much better batteries in them. The OS upgrades that we're taking advantage of have much better battery performance in them. The students, through the instruction, through the driver's manual, we focus more in on what goes on with proper battery management, and the kids learn all of this. We provide charging stations in school because we're unified on our choice of device, and we have all those devices for 3 years. I'm not worried when it goes from MagSafe to MagSafe 2 that I need to now set up all of these different types of adapters, because I don't have a BYOD. I don't have to worry about what potential device could be coming in and having everyone string cables all over the place as they plug all of these things in.
So because we're not changing batteries this time around, it's also then important to recognize that we need kind of a way to see whether a battery is getting close to being depleted or not. So built into the operating system is something tracked that's called a charge cycle on a battery. And you can get to this from Apple System Profiler. You can also pick it up as an extension attribute in Casper. And so I can very easily use Casper to tell me which batteries out there have the most charge cycles on them. And when they get above a certain level, I can call that machine in and say, you know what, I need to run Apple's battery diagnostic on it to find out whether your battery is good or not.
And then we can issue that replacement. So again, we're looking out for them as much as we're trying to allow them to look out for themselves.
Before you go to the next one, I mentioned extension attributes. If you're running Casper, these are your friend. Extension attributes are how I collect all of my information on my computers. If you haven't started playing around with them, please do. There's a huge library of EAs out there on JAMF Nation. People are writing more and more every day. There's a great community at JAMF Nation that can help you write a script to pull an EA, a piece of information. If you need help, just holler. People will step up and help.
I'm going to let Damien address this one, but this is very interesting because this is a problem that's recently been addressed. And I can remember 2 years ago at my first conference here, peppering Mr. Detroit there in the back about Apple IDs and when is Apple going to make this easier for us to deal with students vis-a-vis the COPA issues, particularly with our younger students, and as the software deployment, the App Store, and all of those. I don't want to steal all of Damien's thunder with this, but the App Store with this, as this is further complicating things.
So we all know that Apple introduced the Mac App Store in 10.6.8, and then it's become more and more and more integrated into into their ecosystem and how they distribute software. In fact, to the point where my number one problem right now is trying to figure out how to manage iWork and iLife 13, which require an Apple ID for deployment. And we're not ready in our environment, we're not ready to use an institutional Apple ID, which is the same Apple ID in every machine. We want students to use their own, but we have students that are under 13 who actually aren't legally allowed to have an Apple ID. So Apple has answered this for us back in February. They released something called a device enrollment program as well as an under 13 Apple ID program. So we are now evaluating that, and we'll likely push that button in the next 6 months or so that we then can distribute iWork and iLife 13 to our end users who are under 13.
And because I want to leave at least 15 minutes, I'm going to jump to this next one. So the last thing that we had to address and we had to consider, and we had to again let people know is what's going to happen if, even though you with this with great power comes great responsibility. What happens if you break your machine? What happens if it gets damaged? What happens in any of these cases? And as I mentioned, we're an internal shop in terms of being able to deal with Apple repair. So either Damien or Mike, are Apple certified. They can come in, or some of the students that we have can come in and they can bring their machines in and they can issue repair on them. So we're able to do that. We additionally purchased a 3-year Apple Care, which I suggest all of you do when buying your device. That way they can go into an Apple store if we're not open, and they can have that repair done, because again, all of those devices are then on file. We also have and that's great for dealing with manufactural defects and issues along those lines. But for things like, cracked screens or, things that they're damaged, we actually had for the first 3 years of our thing, we took out an optional insurance policy through a company called Safeware. There's a ton of companies out there that do this, but we have a $250 deductible. So parents and students are responsible for the first $250 of any repair. After that, the insurance would kick in and make up the difference. I will tell you, if you're considering this option, consider it very closely. For our next go-around that we have, we just finished our first year of our second 3-year cycle, if you can follow that math. And we opted to self-insure because what we saw with our damage rates on our first cycle, we didn't really feel the money was justified to be spent, and we're seeing even less damage with our heirs than we did. Because again, they removed the optical drive, they removed the spinning disk hard drive, they removed a number of things that were causing a number of our initial problems. So if again, as you're thinking about this, but again, it puts, one of the things that this also does in terms of damage, in terms of the fact that we don't see these things, is kids need to take responsibility for bringing their machines to us when they break.
Right.
We don't see them all the time. We're not pulling them in periodically to do any of these types of tests, any of these types of things. So, you need to think about what you're going to do in order to issue repair. So with that, I know there's a number of hands that are going up, and we're at that 15-minute mark. I do want to first give you information about both Damien and myself. We both have our business cards up here, so you want them. I'm going to leave this up for the remaining 15 minutes where we have Q&A, and I hope we have a bunch of questions. But email, I have a Twitter addiction, so you can follow me there. Damien, not so much, but he's he will respond.
I'm on Twitter during conferences, essentially.
Yeah. So with the questions, I'm going to ask people to just pass this thing around.
First, I wanted to say a shout out. There's a TED Talk by a high school director that's kind of something very similar. They redid all their laptops in the summer. Their students are able to take a class and they get credit for helping the IT department, and it's great. It's called Enabling Students in a Digital Age. Charlie Riesinger at Lancaster County.
Yep.
And my question is, a lot of this stuff, kind of similar to my question before, a lot of this stuff isn't just, you can't just do it overnight. You can't implement this. You have to kind of change the culture.
Yep.
Of the school.
Definitely.
Takes,
Yep. So I said it took 5 years for us to implement this.
And not only the culture in our student body and parent body, but also the culture in our tech group. Initially, I was not on board with students being administrators. I'll come right out and say it. I was like, whoa, were you asking me to do what? Turns out it's fine, right? It's been working out beautifully. But we have this long history in the tech world of locking things down. And we decided to go, as a school, a completely different direction for some really legitimate reasons. Like when we were trying to decide, do we lock these down or do we not lock these down? We tried to come up with a reason for an educational, pedagogical reason for locking the computer down, and we couldn't come up with one. We had administrative reasons, and we had technical reasons, but educational reasons, we couldn't come up with one. And so we had to go back and rethink, why are we putting these laptops in these kids' hands? Well, it's an educational tool. We're going to improve their educational
It goes back to those learning goals, all those learning goals.
So it just kind of turned it on its head, and we had to change shift that paradigm in the tech world as well as the student body, the parent body. We had parents that were not many, they were objected to this. They did not like this idea.
One learning goal is, how do you address distraction?
Yeah.
How do you change your teaching practice? How do you change the physical space of your classroom in a one-to-one environment? Because if it's like this, and you're teaching like I'm talking to all of you, I have no idea what you're doing.
Right.
I have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
I know you could be like on like Warcraft doing whatever. I don't know. You could be on Facebook. I don't know what you're doing. So if you were a boring teacher before technology, oh my God, it's going to be, you're going to be really boring, because they've got, or if you don't check your facts, they're checking your facts.
Yeah, sure they
You
are.
know, it changes the entire paradigm. So again, you've got to think about the way in which you physically organize things. You've got to think about the way in which you're delivering content. You've got to think about all of these things. And that culture needs to change, and it's not going to change overnight. I work with a group called Educational Collaborators, and we go into schools and we work with them. And I cringe when I get calls that are like, Bill, we want to put you on this team. The school just got all this money and they want to put in laptops in the next 6 months. And we need a PD plan, we need an infrastructure plan, and we need all this software stuff and all the parent materials in 6 months. I'm like, are these people on crack? I mean,
In 6 months.
6 months?
Can't
I
even
mean,
acquire the
but you know, this is the type of thing you got to be willing to put the brakes on. It's funny. Every time I would say the 5 years, my Apple exec, who at the time was a woman by the name of Lisa Erdman, who was awesome, she would cringe because she'd be like, you know, she's like, come on, let's do this now. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this now. We need to set all of this up. And in the end, you know, that planning, all of that work helped change our culture, helped allow us to launch 800 machines in 2 days and have everyone up and running with, you know, with stuff going on in their classrooms on that third day, you know, with all this stuff, or on the second day for them. It is what eventually got us that Apple Distinguished School distinction, you know, in terms of looking at program, in terms of looking at all of those things.
We like to look at things from a 10,000 foot view as well. And for me personally, this generation that we're teaching right now, they're so connected to technology. It's truly ubiquitous.
I know.
And for them, it really is. And for them, it's like breathing. And you take it away, and they're gasping for breath. So we
More questions go.
Sorry.
So we embrace that. We're like, we're not going to take your technology away. We're going to give it to you and empower you to use it appropriately and
Like someone else
responsibly.
go.
Quickly. So, how much classroom time are you spending with it? Like, for example, your fourth graders, and is it one of you who's going?
No,
to
what we have is, it is Mike and our director of Ed Tech, who's also our middle school technology coordinator. During our library classes, our information literacy classes, they're going in and working through that on a cycle over the first half of the year. And then the students are granted, the fourth graders are granted administrative rights at the end of that type of instruction. We're also moving it to, so that in the beginning first few weeks, and I think now it's going to be the next first 2 months, the students will not be taking the fourth graders will not be taking their laptops home until they've completed that process. So, your question.
You mentioned what was the term for the student leader? They were student leaders.
Student Laptop Leadership Group.
Student laptop leadership. Okay. And secondly, we are thinking of and wondering if you do anything like this, or what you would suggest, having a pool of maybe 20 of them in the library for checkout for the student that forgets them. They're in for repair for more than.
No, we have loaners. So we have, for damaged equipment,
Right, what
we have loaners that we will give out.
What happens if a student forgets theirs?
They forgot it. If they
They go
forgot a
without.
book, what are they going to do without their book?
Oh, I guess we're a little bit more.
No, this is
And
this.
these are high school kids. We're starting with the high school students.
We want to reinforce that idea of responsibility,
Exactly.
that personal
There's
responsibility.
one high school,
So-
one middle school, 2 elementary schools. We're going to start with the high school kids, but the boss is thinking of a group of 20 to 30 loaners that if they forget, they're out for repair.
Nope. If they're out for repair, yes. If they forget, no. If you forget your book, you forgot your book.
Interesting. It's very an
You're,
interesting.
you're giving them a pass.
Independent, autonomous learners.
That's what I would say as a parent.
Yeah. No, and we're very clear on that. We're very clear on all this.
I've
It's not
had
that it's not that we're trying to be very rigid, but we're very clear.
As a team, we
Right.
the boss
Get the guy right behind you, then you-
telling them if they forget right after
Right.
forget.
Excellent program. I think it's great. One of the things is in your research on the Student Apple IDs program, do you have any issues with any family members or any families that don't have internet access at home, or do not have an email address
Yeah,
to tie them to you?
our faculty, our student parent body is affluent. That we don't have. I don't think I'm pretty sure we don't have a single family that doesn't have.
We've
internet
done
access.
work leading up to that, particularly with our, and outside of the one-to-one, with Moodle, with our online learning system. If we were going to put class materials online, we needed to make sure that our faculty, our parent body was all online, and all of them are.
Do you foresee any issues with custody disputes or anything like that? All your records up to date? I mean,
No, I mean,
you've
we,
been on this
basically, this is all tied into, all this stuff is tied into our admissions contract.
Yeah.
So for us, again, unlike a public district, again, you're coming to the school, the same things with records and how all of that works.
That would
Whoever's
just-
got legal custody, in terms of
Right.
signing up. And I will tell you this much, if you don't sign our COPA policy, if you don't sign, our other tech-related policies, your enrollment contract is not complete and you are not enrolled in the school. So again, this is one of these things where this is who we are as MKA. This is the type of school that we are. So, you're buying into it. You're not, just as if, you didn't agree with a book that they were using in the English program, you couldn't opt out of that book. You can't opt out of this.
The closest I had to no internet access was a family that had no wireless. Everything was wired. And I handed the student a Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter and said, here, have at it. So.
Good question.
Great program. My question is regard to the lease program.
Yep.
I know it's relatively new. You've been through one cycle, it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I've understood, I haven't been through it myself, but the leasing program, how strict is that when you return the machines? I know with a defective hard drive or
so let me,
just wear and tear.
No. So what we did, our lease, we had a 3-year lease with a $1 buyout at the end. So in the end, we owned all the equipment.
Okay.
And Apple structured that at 0 interest. So it was as good as it was as good as, just financing them. So at the end, we owned them. Apple would take them back off our hands and would, through a third party, would resell them. I did a bunch of research. I would tell you that we spent probably about $1.2 million on our initial buy, spread out over 3 years on a lease. At the end of the 3-year term, I recouped $400,000 in the value of the equipment. So the effective cost of the program for us over the first 3 years was $800,000. So there was huge residual in these. Now, with those, one of the things that we learned from that is the level of damage that comes in on those. The vendors that you will deal with on the resale of this equipment will grade these devices as A, B, or C grade, and they will adjust your values based on that. An A grade got us about $450 a machine. A B or a C grade got us about $250. What we're doing now is, with all of the tracking of the damage, when a kid leaves the school or a student graduates, we're looking at the damage. We're saying, all right, a bent corner cost me this amount of money. Well, all right, we're going to take a percentage of that and apply that and say, the student, much like a book that you didn't return or you damaged, this is a charge that you're going to take based on the equipment. So that as they come in, we're recouping the money lost off of that over time. That goes back into the budget, and then we can use that on the sale of the next one. Hold on a second, let me just take this back over here.
Oh, I can talk loud.
Well, they need it for the recording.
I was just wondering about the student leadership, like how many kids are in that group and how often do they meet?
So the leadership group right now, it started around with 36. It's down to about 24, maybe 24 plus right now.
25, I think.
They meet due to schedule. The middle school meets once on a 6-day cycle because it's a club. The upper school meets a little bit differently because of the way in which the schedule works. And then we generally have either monthly or bi-monthly, depending on schedules, meetings of the entire group after school from about 3:15 to about 5:30. And my number one recommendation in the evening or the after school is a lot of pizza. Yep, Damien, can you get that over there?
I was surprised by your comment about AppleCare. I've personally found that AppleCare is generally not worth it at my school, where we're not in a one-to-one issue. Right. But my question is, what percentage of machines do you find go to repair? And of that, how many do you think how many approximately are user damaged or versus manufacturer defect?
I can give you ballpark numbers. Over a 3-year period, about 1,000 computers. I had about 380 AppleCare incidents. Some of those were repeated, like a machine may have gone in 2 or 3 times. So say 300.
Part of the issue too
Some of
is
that-
if you buy a cycle of machines that have a systemic problem across all, it was a bad part, that's where the AppleCare is going to come in huge.
And what percent was user fault versus?
Let's say user fault was probably 60%, and 40% was manufacturer defect or logic board failure.
That was
or-
most of what we saw in the early go was optical drive damage. Yep, it was optical drive damage, was screen damage or keys. Now this is saying we're done. Music's probably going to come on, but we're happy to hang out since no one else is coming in.